Hello all. This is an interesting panel, and this is about food and retailing. We had a first panel on the fireside where there is a fundamental being said and platform and the premise has been there. Let me slowly just give you a premise on this, what we're going to discuss on. So food and beverage as a sector, if you look at it, that has undergone globally, and India has undergone a various massive transformation, and it's been what used to be a sub-segment of retail has gone into a full-fledged segment which is capable of independently functioning under the traditional retail. And this segment has actually started slowly getting a structural shift in the way that eating out has evolved, be it consumerism and increasing trends of socializing or nuclear family and raising income level. All of this orchestrated a way that India changed that India consumes in terms of food. So if I have to look at the entire segment, the shape, size and construct of the entire industry, what used to be like 5 years or 10 years back has completely changed right now. I mean, it's also evolving. While there's a lot to be done, there's a lot of bottlenecks are also there, but what the change has been gradual, and then it's a constant. And we also have this entire evolution supported by the investment community, PE VCs, who is also strategic investments, who is also supported along the way in terms of increasing the rapid pace of development for the food retailing. So we have Srinivas from KPMG, Amulik from Chai Pond, and Ibrahim from Dudwala. And I'm going to start with Srinivas. So he's been a stakeholder by interacting with all the participants of the industry, and he has a wide view as a transaction advisor because he gets to interact with the companies and investors and various other fraternities being governing bodies also. So let me ask with the opening thoughts about food retailing.
Just to introduce, so I've been there in the industry for 12 years, last 8 years in consulting. So worked for Reliance Retail, set up the entire. So 2005 was when the entire retail boom came in, and I think last 12 years there's a lot of change in the way the entire food retail has emerged. So you see the overall potential. There's a potential in the Indian market of $600 billion, growing pretty much there on the retail side. The key thing that you see from a retail perspective is the merger of the brick and mortar with the e-com. So I think that is a shift on the consumer side, where you will see a lot of service-oriented models coming in and the synergies coming in between the brick and mortar and the e-com. A lot of investments we believe will go in the next decade or so in the food supply chain, and that is where the differentiator will pan out. Okay, so a lot of investment will go into building up collection centers, linking up the farm to the consumer, and that is where the next trend of investment will go in terms of competing for reaching out the customer. So that is one area which is going to be a very key growth pattern for the food and food retail part of it. And the second thing is the technology disruption is actually looking at more competitiveness. So that is second area where investments will go into building up economies of scale and efficiencies on the retail side. So these are the two: the food supply chain, the technology platforms, the combination of brick and mortar, and the fourth part from the consumer side would be more on consciousness of health, consciousness of traceability coming in. I think these are the four key parameters which will change the paradigm of the food retail for the country. Yeah.
Let me start with Ibrahim to give a background. So you've been, most of your work life has been in the Middle East and all, and you chose a category which is retailing in India and milk, which is highly cluttered and unorganized market. So just give us a background, since you floated in 2015, right? So just give us a background why you chose this and then what has been so far.
Earlier friends of mine would call me the fake shake. Now I'm known as the milkshake. So it works either way. The point is, I think we are talking about a market which is responsible for 25% of the global milk demand, right? India alone. And this is something which is continuously rising. So the opportunity here is immense. And a lot of players looking to solve things in the dairy space. I think the government worries about it more than anyone else, because given that this is such a mass commodity, we have that constant rate of increase year on year, and by just in less than a decade, we'll see this doubling. How do we cope up with that demand is a big question. How are we going to make it happen? Government has various schemes ongoing in place for it to make sure that, move more from unorganized to organized, be able to increase output more towards the cooperatives. But the point of the matter is, we kind of started on a very consumer-centric premise that customers need an app for milk. But I think the more important thing to note is that market already exists. We have this system, which is almost sort of like a neural network, which moves through the country and which is delivering milk every day. So for us, it was being able to optimize this and digitize this. So our focus has been entirely that. And I think as Srinivas was talking also about food retail or anything like that, it's a difficult business. It's an exceptionally difficult business. And given that channels are opening up, especially for food retail, if they lose a certain amount of revenue, it's not just that revenue lost, it has a multiplier effect. It goes on, it can have a significantly large multiplier effect. So given this stage where even modern retail format is sort of new in this country, as well as now there are players which, like us, in fact, who have a larger touch point with the customer, I think we're there for a joyride, absolute roller coaster ahead of us. And given that, again, we have a lot of movement towards, I think someone on the panel earlier mentioned that personal consumption expenditure on food is larger in our country than anywhere else. So this just gets exciting as to how players develop that sort of supply chain to cater to the items Indians are buying most, especially as they get richer, which is a slightly different trend here, but I guess it does make a difference.
Amlik, first of all, I want to ask you, are you a chai person or a coffee person?
I'm fundamentally a chai person, but nothing against coffee. I'm having coffee right now. So.
Okay. So, I mean, you've been fairly early into the market. Actually, 2010, you had come into the market in terms of. So, I mean, the first few years would be challenging in terms of as a product creation itself. So, just give us what do you think of it now in terms of the first initial years?
See, frankly, the first few years were challenging because we as a team, we were learning the business. And after the first 2-3 years, we sort of got a good grip as to how to really move ahead in this chai market. And now I think our view is more evolved. Our pursuit from day one remains the same. We are after the ritual of chai. I mean, our motivation was because this is a product that doesn't really need to be sold. It is consumed in hordes. Can we create some gloss, sheen around it? Can we improve the convenience, accessibility, and hygiene around it? And then build a large business model around these few steps. And I think that hypothesis was spot on. It is still the single most important thing for us. And over a period of time, we have realized that the way the world is evolving, it's more of by the world, I mean the Indian market, F&B market. I think it's more of a demand-supply gap. I think the demand is very high. Supply of good, credible brands is less. And the only way to solve this is to take on an omni-channel approach where you're trying to reach the customer through different modes. If you're able to do that, only then you can really stake a claim that you are on your way to kind of having a good grip on the ritual of chai, which is a massive, massive ritual or a habit in the country. So that has been our journey, and we are still on to it.
Srinivas, you must have worked with retailing on the diversified on the food side and everything. So if you look at a top-down and overall view, where do you think a lot of disruptions in the country has happened already? And where do you feel that there is still yet to be an untapped potential that for newer players to come or the existing players to occupy?
Yeah, so if you can break up the entire food into 3 components: the fruits and vegetables, the milk and milk products, and the dairy and the meat and meat products. So when you look at the fruits and vegetables, still there's a lot of potential to actually look at how can we organize it, how can we create differentiation there. The key thing is the entire back-end supply chain. I think with the government investments going in, the next phase of growth, you will see a lot of models coming into delivering cut vegetables, packed vegetables, right? I think that area is still not captured. I think you'll see a lot of models coming in and capturing that model in terms of packaged and cut vegetables. And I think a lot of models are there currently. People are evolving it. But the key thing is the back-end supply chain. Back-end supply chain, the government is putting a lot of pressure in terms of creating linkage between the farm and the markets. The National Agriculture Market is getting created. I think a lot of investment is going into the food supply chain, which will transform the fruits and vegetables market on the consumer side. That's what we believe is going to happen on the food. So it's completely untapped today. Currently, there's a lot of potential there on the fruits and vegetables segment. Yeah. Second, coming to the milk, we are fairly evolved on the milk, packaged milk side. We see more of disruption happening on the value-added milk product side, right? Whether it's like, for example, yogurts or flavored yogurts, flavoring agents, fruit and ice cream mixed together. So a lot of things on value-added will happen on the dairy products. Processed meat, again. Today, a lot of technology is getting disruptive in terms of providing access to consumers on the processed meat side. Where access to food retail chains, again, the cold chain is getting evolved on the meat side. So processed meat also is one of the areas where you'll see a lot of opportunities coming in. And again, a lot of other areas where niche consumer markets, either ethnic consumer trends in India, which will move into an opportunity. Like example, the chai point or the coffee point, which is there, right? Both coffee, tea, and other ethnic snacks that we use. That is one area which might be of interest for players to come in. And a lot of other ethnicity, the global trends on consumer, which will come into India and see like a momos or stuff like that. So we'll see both on that disruption is happening on the consumer side. Yeah. So these are 4-5 areas which I think we believe are the next stage of growth in food retail.
So one more thing you had pointed out in terms of the cut vegetables to have an untapped potential in the Indian market and all. So do we already have the existing capabilities, or do we still have to have some kind of investments? Because I mean, in terms of the logistics, or I think perishable, right? It can actually have 1 or 2 days kind of a shelf life. And do we need to require that kind of a cold supply chain kind of capabilities already in place, or do we need to wait for those logistic investments to happen? Only then is it possible that we can do that?
Yeah. So the entire fruits and vegetables situation is getting changed after the GST getting implemented, and with the e-national market getting created, we are getting into a unified market situation. Ministry of Food Processing is actually staying a lot of focus on creating backward and forward linkages. So the investments will go into creating that supply chain. The front end part of setting up a city processing center is very easy, and the demand side is there. The key part is putting investment into the food supply chain, which will disrupt the consumer side. So you'll see the demand, existing demand, not being serviced. The key part is investments into going to this, but there are a lot of incentives are there for the government to look at that particular infrastructure getting created now.
So one of the points he also pointed out about milk as being commodity in terms of falling through the entire, it's an evolved product in terms of from the procurement, processing or packaging till distribution and marketing to the entire, the process has been evolved process. And if I had to take Dudwala, you are actually, cutting across and then say like, we'll procure and deliver. That, it's, you just minimize the channel and then, so what is the convincing you have to do? Like, what is kind of product adoption you have to work on?
So when it comes to the dairy problem, I think everyone knows White Revolution solved a large part of it. But the last mile distribution has always been unaddressed. When we talk about a country where we are famous for jugaad, it is truly jugaad. Wherever a building has come up, someone has come up, services it. But it has not been in that organized fashion. I think when a service like ours come in, there's obviously value for the supply chain end of things because we're digitizing it. And there is core value for a customer. This is something that they are interacting with almost every day. And in a lot of ways, I feel today, e-grocery adoption in our country is minuscule. It's very little. But actually, I would share a non-data driven, very personable example that kind of happened to me. And it happened to me, so I'm quite pumped about this one. It was early on, it was about 2.5 years back, where we had an event at a building in an area, HSR in Bangalore. And there was a customer who came to our stall. He was already an existing customer, slightly aged. He was the ex-director of one of the bits, I think, Pilani, I'm not really sure. He was about 85 years old, and when he came onto our stall, I happened to glance at his phone while he was showing me some particular doubt that he had. And he had 2 apps, WhatsApp and Doodhwala, which goes to show, I mean, here the nature of what we serve is so ubiquitous. It exists across everyone, across every city needs to consume. And what they do is they just make do with what is there. Base problems which comes from a fragmented, disorganized channel, it is what seeps in. So from a consumer point of view, I mean, even today, we probably have some of the highest retention rates and lowest churn rates the industry has seen. Milk, the kind of longevity it gives you with a customer's natural ascension to a single slot. Possibly we create one of the highest quality of customers that an e-commerce brand can create. So I think that only comes when you have a certain value going to users. And I think as someone had mentioned earlier, the similar example of Dunzo, that no matter what happens, if a product provides value, that's all you need. And here, there is a serious core value that we do provide. And any company which has grown in this milk tech space has sort of seen that, and proved that almost.
So, from Chai point of view of experience, I have actually personally experienced and all. I've been to the store and I've seen what kind of variety and all of that you guys provide and all. So, how do you, you also have a store and then you also have a delivery and all. So, there's an omni-channel model which has been the latest where there is a lot of focus for you. And really there is, if you look at it, there is the line between the service and the delivery is also blurring. So what led you to there?
See, I mean, first, this is my view that in India, infrastructure is a big impediment to retail growth. This, I think, is a hurdle which is going to be there based on our primary sort of insight into the kind of real estate we are interested in. I think this hurdle is going to be there possibly for the next 2 or 3 years. After 2 or 3 years, we see, from our vantage point, huge amount of good, solid real estate supply coming in for retail. And that will show that the infrastructure around is also improving. I mean, for example, look at Bangalore. The whole city is crisscrossed with, metro construction. Another 3-4 years, once that is complete, it's going to do wonders to the retail real estate in that city. And this phenomena is happening, I think, in almost every city across the country. So for us, it was very clear that right now the infrastructure is not such that people are going to, walk over to the store with delight or with pleasure. So our approach was that first and foremost, set up stores in large captive areas where the walk-in experience is a delight for the customer. It's something that the customer looks up to. So Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Gurgaon, that way are very lucky, especially Bangalore. You'll have large tech parks with 90,000, 1 lakh people, and they have all the infrastructure inside where they can walk into the store and have it. So we quickly realized that the walk-in phenomena is going to grow in spurts, in pockets. But yes, we're very bullish about it then, are even more bullish about it now, that after 3 or 4 years, as infrastructure comes up, the walk-in phenomena will go up. Now, when walk-in comes up, then to go also increases. You go, you pick up a cup of chai or a cup of coffee and walk to your office. Now, if you look at the worldwide scenario, it is this infrastructure which has spurted the growth of the category in which we are in. But in India, thankfully, what happened is that the delivery phenomena came in. The delivery players, were able to raise huge amount of money because fundamentally, I think they realized that customer convenience is the single most important thing. And nobody is going to drive out to fine dining, forget chai and coffee places, if they are going to spend 2 hours in the traffic and 45 minutes in the store or in the restaurant. So delivery started growing very, very fast. And as I said, our premise was really convenience and accessibility. When we saw that happening, it was very clear to us that we cannot miss this. And chai, thankfully, is a beverage which holds for delivery very, very well. And it has been delivered in India, especially in Bombay. I remember taking meetings in Reserve Bank of India with the GMs, very senior people, where their chai would come from the ground floor in a polythene bag. Their PN would cut the polythene bag, pour it into a sort of fine china kettle, and then serve it to the guests. It's true, and it happens, I'm sure, even now. So the product is great for delivery. It was all about now coming out with a format which could, help us scale with it, and therefore we went behind it. Then as we went behind it, we started, foraging more data to sort of figure out how to get even more growth. But the idea was not growth really. The idea is how do we get close to the customer so that the customer can just, with least amount of hassle, pick up a cup of chai and coffee. We do a whole lot of coffee also, by the way. So where, and the customer is happy with that ritual. So the data started telling us that while delivery is growing very, very fast and walk-in still has its holds, but in micro markets where the infrastructure is not a constraint, people are consuming the white collars, which is our target customer. They are consuming chai in their office, walking over to the pantry from the dispenser. And that sort of became the third use case which we went after. So really our pursuit has been based on our primary market findings, no major micro hypothesis. Of course, in hindsight, every move can be supported by a macro finding. But fundamentally, we're just going where the consumption is and, giving the last, just kind of elaborating on the last example. And the dispenser market, again, is independent of the infrastructure. Because if you look at the hotels, the offices in India, they have world-class infrastructure. It's just that you don't have the proper roads to get to them or they are clogged. So the moment you are able to set up a channel in which last mile access is very convenient for a ritualistic beverage or beverages like chai and coffee, the growth is going to be there. And with that thought process, we've sort of gone ahead. And last but not least, this is not possible if you don't have a unifying technology backbone, because ultimately your supply chain and your warehouse, your procurement, it's unified. So if you don't have the right technology backbone, you can't execute in all of this at scale. And then over a period of time, the mobile wallet and the various instruments of transaction also changed. It became really important, especially in context of delivery, even for walk-in, and now increasingly even for dispensers. So net-net, first, omni-channel, because of the environment around us, and then second, technology to hold it all together. And in this sort of a way, we've sort of gone ahead, and I think that's the logical path for everybody in this business, really.
So, in terms of listening to both of them, there's a stress on in terms of logistics and technology, but also eventually location, in terms of where you are present, in terms of the closer to the market and everything. So, in the current scenario, if you look at the established players and then upcoming players and all, are there what kind of focus been given on the product? Is the way other areas in terms of the marketing the product? Where's the importance you see?
Communication has been a key thing for any business, right? So I think the key thing is how do you communicate to the customer, how do you reach the customer, how do you educate your product to the customer is the differentiator. So a lot of times the so the current option of brick and mortar getting synergized with e-com is the same thing. Is the way how do you target the customer and how do you reach the customer fast, educate with more knowledge, more information. And see that the delivery is, and you acquire customers fast, right? So that is where the things are going. So you'll definitely the e-platform for any food service retail or any normal food retail will always be a blend of e-com plus the brick and mortar. And the communication channel anyway will be obviously common to both the platforms. So how fast you reach the customer and how you educate the customer and provide access to the customer is the key thing. Yeah.
Interesting. So same as if you being the faster to reach the customer, I mean, work in a perishable product in terms of you probably have a 6-7 hours kind of a shelf life. So do you have to, I mean, there was an already supply chain, a value chain was already in place. Do you have to really reinvent, or you just have to digitize entire supply chain in terms of procuring until the delivery and all? And what happens in the entire process?
So similar to as Amulik just pointed out, in terms of if there is a core value and you can build a last mile solution around it, I think that is the value that you're building more than anything. More than the portal and where exactly your order is coming from, do you have the capability to be able to deliver that? And that is what I think Chai Point does amazingly also. We know because we're similar. India runs on chai, chai runs on milk. So we understand the power of that beverage and the power of a very widely consumed beverage. Anyway, in general. But to say as here, there is a lot of challenge in maintaining the leanness of the milkman model. I think that is a challenge that we do see as we expand our supply chain, strengthen our supply chain. But at the same time, technology is such a great enabler. It allows you to reduce costs significantly, especially because we're in a subscription-centric model, whether it's predictive algorithms, whether it's basic things that reduce your batching, sorting. Again, sorry. Again, because we deliver in a single slot. So that single slot coupled with subscription makes it an entirely different DNA of supply chain. So I think being able to get that in place where we have the right supply chain, right marriage of technology and process, making sure it is also something that can capture the behemoth market that we're talking about. Those are the key factors, in my opinion.
Okay. So, Amalik, you have raised 8-9 rounds of equity funding in, with that much?
3 rounds.
3 rounds in tranches. Yeah. Okay. And 40 million, how much is it?
32 million.
30 million. So what is your experience in terms of convincing the investor? Because this is going to be a new brand, and from the investment point of view, there's various from the location, omnichannel, tech, there's multiple investment areas and all. So what has been your experience in terms of raising capital? Are there more investors willing to commit? And what kind of a value addition do you get in return? Is it only financial investor as a capital, or is it you get more also?
So where we stand right now, I think the investor momentum is pretty solid. If I go back, I think when we raised our Series A, nobody had a doubt that the market is significant. Everybody knew it was massive. But whether we had the capability to organize something which is highly fragmented was the question. So, in Series A, the investor essentially took on a bet on our ability to meaningfully aggregate a highly fragmented market. Over a period of time, we were able to prove it. That brought in Series B. Series C, I think fundamentally for us happened because we were able to demonstrate that the business mix is truly multi-channel, and it's not just a pitch from our side that we are an omni-channel business, but the ratio of revenue streams is meaningfully shared across the 3 channels, which is delivery, dispensers, boxy, stores, and very early on the packaged product side too. So I think now we are at a stage where, I don't think there is fundamentally a doubt on customer preference, chai or coffee. That has been trumped hands down by us. And not just us, I really mean the other startups who were able to raise money, and the fact that some of the big giants also started sort of dipping their feet into this segment. I can tell you, chai is way cooler than coffee right now in terms of the number of stores that are opening. As I said, nothing against coffee because we sell a whole lot of it, but the beverage has a very authentic appeal, and somehow our hypothesis, which increasingly is getting reinforced, that the consumer in India is very confident in being authentic and is not getting swayed by headwinds coming from Western market in terms of what is cool and what is not cool. And I think that is very, very important. So now it's essentially an execution play for us, right? And further investor momentum, private or public, is going to be a function of our execution stream. I think brand, customer preferences, or aggregating a fragmented market, all these doubts are, I think, out. So the prime focus is on execution and increasing appreciation that this execution will also require a strong technology mindset. And there has to be a differentiation coming from technology in our ability to play, and it cannot be just a kind of a run-of-the-mill kind of a approach. I think that's the consideration. So with that mindset, we are quite clear that the sophisticated investors at this stage are evaluating all of these things. And from our standpoint, from the management standpoint, it's all about execution around these things.
A follow-on question. So in terms of future growth also, where do you see the enterprise retail or delivery, which is the largest and fastest growing for you in terms of, because obviously that, in terms of further opening up new stores, you would require further capital, or will you be able to open internally with the internal accruals, or how does it work?
See, just think of it. The size of the market by various estimates, chai, which is sort of the end beverage market, is about 1.5 lakh crore. We are possibly the largest player, and our market share is 0.1%. right? So our goal is to be 1% first, right? So I don't think, there is a growth limitation on any of the channels. Execution standpoint, what becomes important for us is that how do we pace our growth in every channel, because every channel has a bit of a nuance, right? I mean, stores, the investment is higher, building higher growth from the same set of stores through a sharper delivery mechanism, improving walk-ins, that's the other approach, right? Boxy again is a bit of an enterprise sales driven model as of now, but increasingly getting consumerish. For example, very recently we integrated Paytm wallet with our dispensers so that cost-conscious institutions or corporates can have a hybrid model, right? They don't need to buy cheap premix stuff. They can get fresh milk stuff, right? Chai and coffee. And if they're worried about the budget, at very subsidized rates, their employees can get a great cup of chai and coffee. So, so the consumer angle, bringing consumer angle into the corporate buying behavior is sort of one track. So net, for us really, there's growth in every piece. It's how we pace out. There are few driving principles. For example, network effect for our business is very, very strong. It sort of matures later. It's not so visible at the outset. And what do I mean by that? If our presence is really, really strong in a city in all the channels grow very fast. If we have more stores, there are more deliveries happening because the customer recall is high. If there are more deliveries, people are saying, oh, maybe we should try their dispensers. And if they try their dispensers, which essentially is a printer cartridge model for us, we don't sell the machine, we sell the consumables, and they start seeing our packaged product, they walk into an aisle or they go to Amazon.com and they see chai point tea or tea bags or some of the other products, maybe I should order that, right? We clearly see that trend. So our execution bias is now driven by focusing in such a way so that the network effect gets stronger, which means don't spread ourselves too thin, but just go deeper and deeper and stronger in the cities. And there is no mad rush to suddenly sort of occupy the tier 2 or tier 3, because the customer is also parallelly getting very brand conscious. So we feel that if we build a strong brand in these cities, we will have enough time to go and address the rest of the country.
Follow-up question to what he has said, sorry. And in terms of he had spoken about going deeper into the market and everything. In your case, would be completely different, onboarding newer areas and going to a newer market and all. And so what would be your plan for expansion, and how has been your experience with investors and all?
I wouldn't fully agree with that, though. It's not just about getting too large a geographical footprint, similar to as the problem Chai Point has. Because I think they're also solving something which is very mass and very disorganized with a large demand, very similar to our problem. There is so much scope within the cities that we're in itself. Given that we're just a 3-city model right now, and even in Bangalore, given our largest market, we have grown, yes, almost 8x in the past year, but we are still just a drop in the actual last mile distribution of fresh milk. So for us, it is going to be a lot of expansion and getting deeper in the current places, actually having that kind of density. And from a very business standoff, for something as localized as milk, density plays a huge factor. And we have something that we also internally call the apartment network effect, that there is a sort of tipping point once we get an apartment to where it grows in itself, because that's the nature of milk. People talk about, hey, ye doodh kahan se aaya, etc., etc. And we are all about, the folk. So Jinesh, one of our investors, I think he's here somewhere, from Omnivore, he put it in probably the most interesting way. He said, "Dunya farm to folk kar rahi hai, tum log folk to farm kar rahe ho." Where we're actually looking at, yes, there's the consumption pattern, this is a consumption-driven thing. Let us capture that. So it is of a lot of value to be able to get deeper into our current markets, actually become a significant force when we can say that we are possibly, even though today we're a much smaller entity, but we are the largest residential distributor for Nandini already. But there is still a lot of scope. And when we actually say that we are one of the largest, we are possibly the largest residential distributor of fresh milk across, I think that is something, then we will look at next stage of growth. The market is too large to be spreading ourselves too thin. And that's something, that's a trap we would like to avoid.
Quickly, I want to just ask one more thing before I'll open it for the audience. Srinivas just mentioned that, another untapped potential is about the cuts vegetable and all. The area that the value chain, supply chain, where you work has an immediate advantage for you to enter that space. So how is it like, when you say that, you will work and deepening the market in the existing residential areas, so would you continue to focus where there is a lot of growth going to come up, or you're going to be improving the product diversification, get into the other markets and all?
It would be some amount of assortment diversification also. For any company to be relevant in a sort of e-commerce space, you have to have a consumer-centric attitude. And in this country already today, in the morning, there is your doodwala and there is your sabziwala who operates. So there is a strong natural ascension for our customers to have a larger assortment. And something like cut vegetables, again, is a value add for increasingly urbanized households. So there are a lot of products. We have been able to put our finger on it, that mostly it's around fresh perishables. A couple of the categories Srinivas did mention in terms of dairy, FNV, FNM, these are highly perishable. And when there is a service which is sort of your personal grocer, has that daily touch point with you, you tend to rely on it so that you have better, fresher produce. In fact, we really hope that one of the byproducts of when we are able to make Doodhwala a vast name would be that we would cut down in the lead times that at least the last mile distributor has. Removing some amount of the fulfillment center, some amount of all that. So the customer, what they finally get, at least we can say from our side, it has had the shortest possible lead time.
Excellent. We'll conclude the session now, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you a lot.